to take a moment to go over how to find neutral spine when you're standing on your feet. So I'm going to turn sideways so that you can see. Anytime we're looking for a neutral position, you want to make sure that your ears are lined up right on top of your shoulders, right on top of that little knob that's in the center of your shoulder. So a lot of us have a tendency to kind of put our head forward, which misaligns the neck. So we just lift those ears up, earlobes sit right on top of those little knobs on your shoulders. And then you want to make sure your shoulders sit right over the center of your rib cage. So this is another one. We have a tendency either to thrust the rib cage forward or to tuck the rib cage back. You just want to make sure that that rib cage is centered and your shoulders sit right over the center of it. Then we think about the rib cage sitting right on top of the pelvis. So again, if we arch our backs, the rib cage is forward, the pelvis is behind. If we tuck the pelvis under, then we get the pelvis forward and the rib cage behind. We just want to stack them one right on top of the other. And then the final thing to think about is that your hips line up over your heels. So we're not forward over the balls of the feet, but we're stacked right on top of the heels with the balls of the feet still anchored to the floor. So again, we want to think about ears over shoulders, over ribs, over hips, over heels. Nice and simple. So the other thing that we want to think of is the rib to hip alignment. And this is the same cue that we use very often when we're lying on our backs in a supine position, getting ready to do core work. So all you do is take your thumbs, place them right on the lower portion of your rib cage. Then you can take either your middle or your index finger and place it right on your hip bones, right where they protrude and poke a little bit. And then you just want to make sure that those 2 points are stacked, one right on top of the other. So again, if I arch, my ribs are going to be forward of my hips. If I tuck my pelvis under, my pelvis is going to be forward of my rib cage. We want them stacked, one right on top of the other. And the other thing that you can use as a cue is, so the other cue that we can use is twofold. We think about the tailbone aiming straight down toward the floor. So that means it's not sticking out behind us. But that also means it's not tucking underneath us. And sometimes people have a tendency, when you think about aiming the tailbone toward the floor, they'll aim too far and they'll push the pelvis forward into a tucked position, and then you get this massive squeeze through here, which is not what we want. Your back is no longer an engaged part of your core when you tuck the pelvis under. So you aim your tailbone toward the floor, and then you take these bony landmarks on the front of your body, your hip bones and your pubic bone, and you think about them, which they actually do, you think about them making a triangle. And you want that triangle level, all 3 points level, and that base point pointing straight at the floor. So if you were to tuck your pelvis under, that base point would thrust forward. If you were to tuck or tip your pelvis back behind you, then that base point would tuck under you and the points aren't even visible to your eyes anymore. So you think about sending your tailbone straight to the floor, and then you just check those 3 points of reference to make sure they're level and the pubic bone is pointing straight down, not tucked under, not reaching back behind us. So the reason neutral spine is so important is the core is all of these abdominal muscles on your front, which is what we tend to focus on, tons of muscles on your back, and then muscles on either side of the body. And if we tuck the pelvis under, and you can try this, which is often taught, right? To tuck your pelvis under, to pull your pubic bone toward your nose. That's a good cue for someone who sits here all the time. But if you tend to stand in a fairly neutral position and someone's telling you that, you're going to end up here. Common misconception, if you do this, sure, you'll feel these muscles a lot more perhaps, but you won't feel these muscles at all unless you feel strain on your low back. And tucking the pelvis under is generally why people who exercise complain of having low back pain because their back muscles are not a supported part of the core working together. So the opposite is true if you tend to stand like this. You'll notice that your back is going to get really tight, especially through that lumbar or low back region. But if you think about what these muscles are doing, and these muscles, they're not doing anything at all. They can't activate in this position. So you want to stay in neutral so that your front core, your back core, and your right and left sides are all working together, all strengthening together. And that's how we prevent injury. That's how we get stronger, because you can't get strong if all you're working are these muscles and nothing else. You can get superficially strong, but not strong in terms of performance, right? Maybe just a little bit of an aesthetic trick, if you will. So if you have any questions about standing neutral spine, please comment or send me a message, and I will talk to you later.